Hey guys, it's Kevin again. This is my review for The War with Grandpa. And what The War with Grandpa is essentially about is we center on the character of Peter. He is this kid in middle school. You know, he's going through a normal life, but his grandfather has recently moved back into his house. He is also taken his bedroom, and Peter really does not like that. He's very upset about this, so much so to the point where he starts to pull pranks on his grandfather because this really enrages him. And so his grandfather decides that in order for them to settle this once and for all, they're going to start a prank war of sorts and basically try to bury the hatchet, I guess, and that's literally the plot of this movie. So yeah, The War with Grandpa, I was very much not excited for this film. Look, here's the thing. When we're in a situation like where we are right now, and there's really not too many movies coming out, every movie that comes out into theaters, you know, is a blessing. Every movie that comes into theaters is something that I'm happy about. But it just utterly puzzled me that out of all the films to come out into theaters, The War with Grandpa would potentially be one of them. I never thought this is where we'd be, but we are. I went to see it because, you know, I'm trying to see everything that I possibly can in theaters because I feel like my theater's going to close soon, whatever. I went to see it, and yeah, it's pretty dumb. It's about as dumb as you would expect it to be. I will say it's a little bit better than I was expecting, but it still is a pretty bad movie that really just doesn't feel like anything that is really worth seeing at all. Very much feels like a film that just doesn't really fit into this decade, but we're just getting into it right now. Now, I will say, the thing that does somewhat help this film is actually the acting. The acting is not as bad as I really was expecting. I was very concerned going into this about Robert De Niro, especially coming off the heels of such an amazing performance in The Irishman. For him to now do something like this, I wasn't really that excited for, but I will say he gives a little bit more effort than I was expecting. He does seem like he is having fun. You know, he definitely does have, the typical charismatic sort of feel that you expect Robert De Niro to have, and he actually does add a few layers to this character, which I really did appreciate. So I definitely did enjoy Robert De Niro's performance in this film more than I was expecting. He's one of the best actors, but when he does films like this, he tends to almost immediately regret them, so it was good to see him give a little bit more effort than he usually does in this kind of film, so that was definitely something I appreciated. Fegley is another actor that I've always really appreciated, and he's good in this film. He does what he needs to do, you know. We'll get to the character a little bit later, but I thought he did an alright job for the most part. Rob Riggle, I enjoyed. Christopher Walken, you know, I don't think that they were too bad here either. Laura Marano, I didn't think was that bad. Now, the one performance that did not really work for me at all was Uma Thurman. Everything about her in this movie just felt so, like, over the top and stereotypical, and I just was not a fan of it. And I've seen Uma Thurman give like decent performances before. I've seen her do some really good stuff. So again, it's honestly not like I'm honestly pretty surprised that her performance was as bad as it was here, because I really thought out of everyone, she really was the worst in this film. I didn't think she did a very good job here, very much at all. I really was not impressed by her. But again, the acting is not as bad as you really would expect, so I will give the film that. In terms of the directing here from Tim Hill, though, unfortunately, I can't say the same, because not only does Tim Hill direct this film in a way that is so over the top and so obnoxious, but it's a film that also just doesn't seem to know who its target audience is, because it'll constantly fluctuate between these dumb scenes that are clearly geared towards kids, you know, regarding old people and the divide between them and kids, and then all of a sudden it'll get really, like, sappy and almost like a drama that you would expect for Robert De Niro to be in, and Hill just doesn't seem to understand how to balance the two at all. Every single time he tries to add more dramatic layers, it's always jarring. It never felt like it had a place in the film. I honestly, at points, thought I was watching a different movie. It was so jarring the way that he tried to go about that, and I just don't think that his directing worked really well here at all. It just didn't seem like he had a very well realized vision, and very much just felt like he did it because he needed to. It just didn't really feel like he added much to the film in terms of his directing, and the screenplay also does not leave there. It leaves a lot to be desired, for sure. I mean, the best way to sum up this film is that it is basically the most, think of the most stereotypical sort of, plotting you can think of, but something that's like a sitcom from the 90s. That's what this really feels like. The entire film, half of it is just a prank war between a really obnoxious kid and his grandfather. And when I say a really obnoxious kid, I mean this kid is really fucking obnoxious. Oakes Fegley, like I said, is good in the role. But my God, Peter as a character is just so annoying in this movie. Literally all of this that he's doing is just because he can't have his bedroom. You know, he's stuck playing like video games and things like that, and he's all pissed about it, and he's going after his grandfather, and none of it ever feels like this needs to happen. It feels like this could easily be resolved, but no, we just gotta drag it out with more pranks, and none of it really feels that necessary. None of it feels like it's really adding much to the film at all, and I just felt like a lot of it just got so tiring after a while. I grew tired of it so quickly with all of the pranks that they were doing. None of them were funny. It's literally something as simple as like him replacing shaving cream for like toothpaste and it getting stuck to like Robert De Niro's like face, and then going as far as to literally make him almost fall off a roof. Like, that's how far they're willing to go, and none of it is funny. None of it really got to me, and I just thought it just was very tiresome, and it wasn't something that I was really appreciating. And what annoys me about it is that I actually do feel there was a solid arc in there. Robert De Niro's character has recently lost his wife, and we are briefly cutting back to it, but they never really dive into it. It's like, no, we have to focus on this prank war instead, because that's what we really want, right? We just want to see an old man and his grandson just like bicker for like 90 minutes. That'd be entertaining, right? No, it's really not. It's really annoying, and the subplots also really don't do the film justice at all. There's a subplot involving Robert De Niro's friends and them trying to win the affections of Jane Seymour's character, and every time it came up, I didn't understand what it was doing in this movie. It felt like, again, it was for a different audience, and it's not just Hill that has this problem. The writers also very much have this issue where they just don't seem to know who this film is actually for, because that's not something kids are going to be invested in. That's not something that they're going to really enjoy. So what is this doing here? Why is this in the movie? Is this even supposed to be in this film? It just, I don't understand what the point of it was. Again, it's another one of those things where every time it came up, it just was very jarring to me. The worst of the subplots for sure, though, involve Laura Marano's character and her liking this guy, and Uma Thurman literally going on like a witch hunt for him. Like, she wants nothing to do with this guy. Anytime he's there, she like chases him down. It's so stupid. It's literally something out of like a bad like 80s or 90s sitcom, and I just couldn't stand any of it. So again, if any of this sounds compelling to you, then go nuts, I guess. But this is the sort of very schmaltzy, very just stereotypical, very generic, very uninspiring writing that you are stuck with in this film. There really isn't anything special to it. There really isn't anything that I gravitate towards in terms of the writing, and it just really aggravated me after a while. So yeah, the screenplay here really doesn't do the film much justice at all. The cinematography is fine, I guess. Not really too much to say about it. And then the score to this film was very weird. Very weird, because again, similar to the writing, there are points where it's just a playful score like you would expect for this film to have, and then all of a sudden there's like this string section that pops up, these violins that start playing, literal violins start playing in these very like heartwarming scenes, and again, I got very confused as to what movie I was watching because it didn't seem to have any real place in this film. There's a scene where like he's talking to his granddaughter and it's really sweet and it's like, okay, I like this. Or when they're showing his wife that has passed away and it's like, cool, I like this. But at the same time, you start to question like, what is this doing in this movie? How does this correlate with his grandson making him fall out of a chair? Or how does this correlate with Robert De Niro making the bully of his grandson's school like throw up into his backpack? Like, how does this correlate? It just doesn't. It doesn't at all, and it just doesn't really work. So again, it's just a film that is so sloppily done in really every way, and the editing as well for this film I think is really bad. There are these jarring time jumps in the film, and every time it happened it threw me off, especially towards the end. There's this one time jump that really just kind of came out of nowhere. The way the film ends as well is so abrupt. Just the editing is not very well done here. There's a lot of scenes that drag on. There's a lot of scenes that almost feel like they could be cut out of the movie entirely and it wouldn't matter. There's a lot of running gags that don't work here. Just the editing was not doing it very much for me at all. The humor in this movie as well is so LCD. I mean, look, this is another one of those cases where I was with a crowd that was absolutely loving this movie. The biggest crowd that I've been with for a movie, y'all. Even when I saw Tenet, my crowd was not this big. I had a really big crowd for this movie. I don't know if it's because it's for kids, and for some reason, you know, parents wanted to take their kids to some random Robert De Niro movie because they had nothing better to do, but I had a really large crowd for this movie, and they seem to be loving it, and that's great. I, on the other hand, wanted to die throughout because I just thought this film was insufferable in terms of its humor. It's, again, just very lowbrow. It's very much something that is trying to be for kids, but then you have jokes that just aren't for them at all. There's a really bad recurring joke with Rob Riggle's character when every time it came up, it just did not work for me. I can't really recall of a single time in this movie where I actually laughed. I can't recall of a single time in this movie that actually worked for me in terms of humor, and I just found a lot of it to just be very cringy, and it just wasn't very much working. Overall, The War with Grandpa is basically what you expect it to be. It's a very, very, overall, The War with Grandpa is pretty much what you expect it to be. It's very obnoxious. It's very over the top. It doesn't really seem to know who its target audience is for. Half of the film is trying to be this really stupid kids movie, but then the other half is trying to be something a lot more serious. There are some really dumb subplots. The performances, admittedly, aren't as bad as you'd expect, but the humor falls so flat. There's very little entertainment value, and there just isn't a lot going on in this film that really is worth seeing. Look, there are quite a few films out there right now that I would generally recommend. This really is not one of them. Unless you just have nothing better to see, I guess go see it, but really other than that, there really isn't that much to this film. So I'm going to give The War with Grandpa overall a D+. But over, guys, to my review of The War with Grandpa. Let me know what you guys saw this movie. All your thoughts on it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.